Chapter 12 of The Romance of Modern Engineering. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Abai in September 2022. The Romance of Modern Engineering by Archibald Williams. Chapter 12. The Simpeon Tunnel. An entertaining volume might be written on the conflicts between the snow-clad, storm-swept Alps and man, the soldier and engineer. How stirring is the story of Hannibal and his Carthaginians, fresh from the burning sands of Africa, pushing through the icy horrors of the little Saint Bernard. And of Napoleon, snatching a shovel from the numbed grasp of a pioneer, to lead the attack on the drifts of the pass that lay between him and the famous field of Marengo. Admirable as was the courage that enabled Carthaginian, Gaul, Goth, Hun, and Frenchman to triumph over the resistance of nature, we must not let the fascination which attends the clash of arms blind us to the romance of the later phases of the struggle, still being waged, though time has changed the fashion. Now no longer is seen the train of elephants or baggage mules, and the glitter of spear and sword and bayonet. In their place we have the iron steed climbing steadily through the rocky fastnesses, and those wonderful weapons of the engineer, the theodolite and persistent mechanical drill. Armies occupy the glens, but they are armies of workmen. Generals issue orders and direct the march, but the march is one of peace, more fraught with the good of mankind than was the passage of invading hordes. What patience and skill is represented by the great tubes that pierce Mont Cenis, Mount St. Gotthard, the Arlberg, and the Simplon. Yet the names of the men who planned and executed such deeds are unknown to the world at large, though every schoolboy is familiar with Hannibal and Napoleon. The dash into the darkness of a tunnel is so frequent an occurrence on a railway journey that we reck little of it. Perhaps sometimes, after losing sight of the sunshine for several minutes, we have a dim consciousness that there has been wonderful work done on that part of the line, and we return to the perusal of our books and papers while our train speeds on over or through other engineering triumphs. Having eyes, we see not. Think of the task that an engineer sets himself when he undertakes to burrow through a mountain for several miles. To save time, he must commence the work at both ends simultaneously. To make sure of the headings meeting, he must not put tool to rock until all his calculations have been made most carefully by compass and theodolite, and verified time after time. To deal with the water springs possibly lurking in the mountain's heart, he must drive the tunnel on a rising gradient to the center, a much more complicated feat than a perfectly rectilinear course. To give his men an atmosphere fit to breathe, special apparatus for ventilation must be installed that will force the outer air deep into the very heart of the rocky mass. All this entails years of anxious and unremitting toil. At any moment he may find himself face to face with an obstacle that threatens the ruin of his enterprise, the fall of a stratum, the inrush of a subterranean reservoir. There are many foes waiting for him. In short, so great are the uncertainties and difficulties of tunnel driving that the engineer, when confronted by a range or mountains of hills, decides in favor of burrowing only when calculation has shown that the longest way round is not the shortest way home. In adding up the total advantages of an open road in cutting and of a tunnel, there are many things to be considered and weighed one against the other, economy controlling the balance. A detour costs less in construction and is sooner open for traffic. A tunnel is shorter, less expensive to maintain, and avoids the heavy gradients of the open way. But its initial cost is enormous, both in time and money. Fortunately for international communication, the great advance in the art of tunnel building has done much to remove the principal objections to tunnels, and when the choice lies between a tunnel and a long detour with stiff gradients, the former generally wins the day. Hence some of the most remarkable engineering triumphs. The story of Mont Cenis and St. Gotthard tunnels has been told so often that it will be here but briefly recapitulated as preface to an account of an even greater undertaking still in progress beneath the Simplon. Between Italy and France runs the range known in its different portions as the Graian and Cottian Alps. Prior to 1871, the Fell Railway, laid on the road built by the first Napoleon, transported travelers across the frontier. This track proving insufficient, Italian engineers began their surveys for a tunnel under the Grand Vallon that should connect the Paris-Marseille railway system by means of a branch from Mâcon with the Italian lines that converge on Turin. The work, commenced the same year, was, thanks to the aid of the newly invented air drills of Sommelet, completed in 1871 at a total expenditure of £3,000,000. The following year witnessed the inauguration of a similar scheme for piercing the Mount St. Gotthard, and linking up Belgium, Germany, and Switzerland with Italy via Bâle and Lucerne. Nearly 300 million francs were guaranteed by the countries most interested in the undertaking, and after the changes and chances of 10 years, marked by labor and financial difficulties, the death of M. Favre, the contractor, and the Franco-German War, the tunnel was opened to traffic. In addition to the main tunnel, 9 1/3 miles long, the engineers constructed several wonderful helicoidal, that is, corkscrew-shaped tunnels on the approaches, in which the track doubles back and over itself in a manner most bewildering to the traveler. Length for length, the St. Gotthard was driven almost twice as fast as the 8-mile Mont Cenis, or more properly Grand Vallon tunnel. The cry was still for more. A glance at the map of Switzerland reveals a railroad running from Lausanne along the north shore of Lake Geneva, and on through the Rhone valley to a terminus at Brieg. On the Italian side of the neighboring Lepontine Alps, the northern lines throw out the feeler to Arona, at the south end of Lake Maggiore. Between these termini, the only present means of communication is a daily service of coaches, running over the fine mountain road. But this will soon be a thing of the past, as a tunnel is fast penetrating the Simplon in a straight line from Brieg to Iselle, a small town on the upper waters of the Diviera, a tributary of the river Toce. A new railway is being built from Arona up the Toce valley via Domodossola to complete the connection and provide a new route from Paris to Genoa by way of Dijon, Portallier, and Lausanne. The Simplon tunnel will have an ultimate length of 12 1/3 miles, of which 12 are on the straight, the line curving away at the ends to join the open tracks. At the center there will be a level stretch of about 750 yards. From this the line falls gently on a gradient of 1 in 500 to Buffy at the Swiss end, and by a more sudden descent of 1 in 143 to Iselle in Italy. The highest point being but 2,314 feet above sea level, or 1,474 feet less than in the case of the St. Gotthard, the cost and difficulty of haulage will not be nearly as great as that of the more easterly route, and only one helical tunnel, on the Italian side, is necessary for the approaches. The Simplon differs from the Mont Cenis and St. Gotthard undertakings in that the tracks will run in separate parallel tunnels, the axes of which are 56 feet apart. At present, only one of these is being completed to full section, 19 feet 6 inches by 19 feet 6 inches. The other will be enlarged from its temporary dimensions, 10 feet by 8 feet, as soon as the need arises, at a much smaller cost than the first. Every 220 yards, cross passages are cut between the two tunnels, the most recent only remaining open to promote the proper ventilation of the workings. This subsidiary work, which for distinction's sake may be styled Tunnel No. 2, has also proved most useful for drainage, the storage of material, and as a conduit for the compressed air and water pipes. The determination of the center line of so long a tunnel running under a series of lofty peaks is no easy matter. It being impossible to pick out a straight line immediately over the proposed path of the tunnel, mark it, and guide the operations by observations of these marks from time to time, the surveyors, after setting 2 fixed points, one at each end of tunnel number 1, had to calculate the path of the excavations by means of triangulations struck from 11 peaks, of which Monte Leone holds the central position. On the top of each summit is placed a signal, consisting of a small pillar of masonry founded on rock, and capped with a sharp pointed cone of zinc, 1 foot 6 inches high. An observatory was built at each end of the tunnel in such a position that 3 of the summits could be seen, a condition very difficult to fulfill on the south side owing to the depth of the gorge, the mountains on either side being over 7,000 feet high. Having taken the angles to and from each visible signal, and therefrom having calculated the direction of the tunnel, it was necessary to fix, with extreme accuracy, sighting points on the axis of the tunnel, in order to avoid sighting on to the surrounding peaks for each subsequent correction of the alignment of the galleries. To do this, a theodolite 24 inches long and 2 3/8 inches in diameter, with a magnifying power of 40 times, was set up in the observatory, and about 100 readings were taken of the angles between the surrounding signals and the required sighting points. Thus, at the north end, 2 points were found about 550 yards before and behind the observatory, while on the south side, owing to the narrowness of the gorge, the points could only be placed 82 yards and 176 yards in front. One of these sighting points consists of a fine scratch ruled on a glass in an iron frame, behind which is placed an acetylene lamp. Corrections of alignment are always done by night, the whole being rigidly fixed into a niche cut into the rock, and protected from climatic and other disturbing agencies by an iron plate. The direction of heading number 1 is checked by experts from the Government Survey Department at Lausanne about 3 times a year, and for this purpose a transit instrument is set up in the observatory. A number of 3-legged iron tables are placed at intervals of 1 mile or 2 miles along the axis of tunnel number 1, and upon each of these is placed a horizontal plane, movable by means of an adjusting screw, in a direction at right angles to the axis along a graduated scale. On this plane are small sockets, into which the legs of an acetylene lamp and screen, or of the transit instrument, can be quickly and accurately placed. The screen has a vertical slit, 3 inches in height, and variable between 13/16 inches and 3/16 inches in breadth, according to the state of the atmosphere, and at a distance shows a fine thread of light. The instrument, having first been sighted on to the illuminated scratch of the sighting point, is directed up the tunnel, where a thread of light is shown from the first table. With the aid of a telephone, this light is adjusted so that its image is exactly coincident with the cross hairs, and the reading on the graduated scale is noted. This is done 4 or 5 times, the average of these readings being taken as correct, and the plane is clamped to that average. The instrument is then taken to the first table, and is placed quickly and accurately over the point just found, by means of the sockets, and the lamp is carried to the observatory. After first sighting back, a second point is given on the second table, and so on. These points are marked either temporarily in the roof of the heading by a short piece of cord hanging down, or permanently by a brass point held by a small steel cylinder, 8 inches long and 3 inches in diameter, embedded in concrete in the rock floor, and protected by a circular casting, also sunk in cement concrete, holding an iron cover resembling that of a small manhole. From time to time the alignment is checked from these points by the engineers, and after each blast the general direction is given by the hand from the temporary points. The accuracy of the surveyor's calculations is one of the greatest marvels of modern engineering. In the Mont Cenis tunnel, the error was but a matter of 1 inch in 8 miles, in the St. Gotthard about a foot in 9 miles, quite negligible quantities. The contractors, Messrs. Brandt, Brandau and Company of Hamburg, signed in May 1898 the contract for the entire completion of the work by May 13, 1904, or within 5½ years of the commencement on November 21, 1898. For every day in excess of that period, a fine of 5,000 francs, £200, will be imposed, and for every day less the contractors earn a premium of equal amount. Epidemic, war, or mutual lassitude of Italy and Switzerland are fixed as the only causes for the cessation of work. Should the operations continue for more than a year beyond the stipulated time, the contractors will hand over the execution to the Jura Simplon Company. The contract price is 69,500,000 francs, or about £2,780,000. The progress of the tunnel is shown in the following figures. In 1898, out of a total of 21,564 yards, 447 were completed. By the end of 1899, 4,227 yards. By the end of 1900, 7,947 yards. By August 1901, 10,790 yards. By June 1902, 13,345 yards. Since then, the rate of advance has been steady, and we may expect that, unless some unforeseen obstacle of unusual proportions presents itself, the work will be successfully concluded in contract time. A simple calculation shows that the average advance from November 1898 to June 1902 was 31 feet a day. During part of this period, Sunday was considered a dies non by the workmen, and the yearly holidays being also subtracted, the average then rose to 33 or 34 feet per diem. Compare this with the average 7¾ feet of the Mont Cenis, and the daily 13½ feet of the Mount St. Gotthard, and the rapid development of the art of tunneling is evident. In justice to M. Favre, we must, however, admit that the total section of the two Simplon tunnels is not equal to that of the single St. Gotthard, but even when due allowance has been made on this head, the contrast in speed is marked. One of the greatest difficulties in tunnel driving through mountains arises from the need of proper ventilation at the working face. The heat of a tunnel increases with the altitude of the superincumbent mass. At the center of the Simplon, where 6,000 feet of rock cover the workings, the heat would be unendurable but for artificial means of cooling, while the fumes from the explosive would render the air unfit for respiration, were it not constantly replaced by fresh supplies from outside the tunnel. The plant for ventilation and transmission of power, shops, hospitals, laundries, and other establishments for the convenience of employees are practically the same at Buffy and Iselle. It will therefore suffice to describe what is seen at the Italian end. The first thing that attracts our attention is the power-house, containing 3 Escher-Wyss turbines, 2 of 250 horsepower and 1 of 600 horsepower, running at 170 revolutions per minute. To these are attached 10 pumps for supplying water to hydraulic accumulators at a pressure of 1,764 pounds to the square inch. From the accumulators, the water passes through 4-inch pipes up the tunnel to the working face, where it actuates 6 rock drills to be described presently. It is fortunate for the contractor that he can, at comparatively small cost, harness the force of the Diveria to his drills. The river has been dammed about 2½ miles above the power-house, and turned into 2 reservoirs connected with the turbines by large pipes, cast iron for the first 1,440 yards, and then built up of steel plates 1/4 inch thick. At the power-house, the pressure of the water is about 250 pounds to the square inch. A special pair of 200 horsepower turbines does all the ventilating of the Italian excavations. Each drives a fan 12¼ feet in diameter and 3 tons in weight, which forces air through a 14-inch pipe to the working face. The pipe is carried along close to the roof of the tunnel and is added to as the excavation proceeds. We notice the 2 electric light stations, each supplying current for 32 arc lamps of 500 candle power and 116 candle power bulbs. Passing the machine tool shop, where are installed lathes, planing machines, saws, etc., all worked by turbines, we come to the smithy and foundry, a most important part of the workshop. Their principal function is to make and repair cutters for the brandbohrer, invented by and named after the contractor. Footnote. Sad to relate, the same fate overtook Messieurs Favre and Brandt, death from apoplexy before the completion of their great works. End footnote. The welfare of the employees has been provided for in the bathhouses, where every miner can have a bath or douche when he leaves the tunnel at the end of his shift, and in the laundries and drying rooms, where the dirt and moisture is removed from his clothes. Instead of a locker, each man has a numbered cord supporting 3 hooks, and a soap dish, which, when loaded with their owner's belongings, are hauled up to the ceiling out of the way and into the warm upper stratum of air. At the restaurants, excellent food is provided, for the very moderate sum of 11 pence a day. 2 pence more ensures the miner a comfortable bed in rooms lit by electric light, so that his bodily needs are well cared for. Debris is removed from, and material carried into the tunnel by trucks and engines running on a line of 31½ inch gauge. The engines are of 2 types, steam and hot air. The steamers have very large boilers, so that when steam is once up, they may make the journey to and from the working phase without any need for stoking and the consequent fouling of the atmosphere. Their height to the top of the boiler is but 6 feet 6½ inches, and the short 14-inch funnel is provided with a hinge for lowering it in confined spaces. The air locomotives are used chiefly in the headings. Their freedom from fire and steam fits them for haulage in the farthest interior, where coolness is of great importance. The compressed air, driving a single cylinder that actuates the 2-foot road wheels through intermediate gearing, is stored in 27 cylinders, at a pressure of 1,030 pounds to the square inch, the supply being renewed when necessary from an air valve situated 1¾ miles from the entrance, and connected by piping with compressors at the power station. For the following description of the southern or Italian end of the excavation, the writer is largely indebted to an account that appeared in the columns of The Engineer. The men work in 3 shifts of 8 hours each. Their day is reckoned, Jewish fashion, from 6 p.m. till 6 p.m. 7 days a week the operations go on, as soon as the boundary line between the 2 countries has been passed, for the Italian workmen, who obey their priests in the matter of Sabbath-keeping while in Italy, declare that they have no religion when once they enter Switzerland. This is the only blot on the undertaking, for, in the opinion of tunnel experts, no loss of time, but rather gain, is secured by allowing men, horses, and machinery to rest for the 1 day in 7. As it is, work goes on incessantly from one year's end to another, with the exception of 4 or 5 days which are particular feasts, or are days on which the special government engineers appointed for verifying the axis of the tunnel require cessation of work for getting their lines into the tunnels from their telescopes and theodolites. The men are encouraged to exert themselves by a system of premiums. Each gang benefits by any daily advance over the average. The work is so unpleasant and exhausting that but for some such arrangement there would be flagging, with loss to the contractors. Trains, running to a regular timetable, convey men and materials in and out of the tunnel about 30 times a day, punctuality in starting and arrival being strictly observed. The air at the entrance is described by a visitor as a more sulphurous edition of that of the London Metropolitan Railway. As the face is approached, the temperature falls until we enter the comparative comfort of the fresh air supply. The tunnel is well lined with Antigorio gneiss, the spoil of the excavations. Every 100 meters a refuge is let into the southwest wall, and at every 1,000 meters small cellars have been constructed for the storage of supplies and signaling apparatus. At the tunnel station, passengers quit the train and proceed on foot to the scene of excavation, where springs of water are unpleasantly in evidence. The temperature of these inflows shows that they are due to leakage from the surface, and not to the proximity of a subterranean reservoir. On the Italian side of the mountain, the first 4,350 meters pierced were through gneiss, hard but comparatively free from moisture. Then followed a short section, 40 meters long, of micaceous schist that has proved to the contractors much what the Great Spring was to Mr. Walker in the Severn Tunnel. The schist, being softer than the rock, is squeezed into any excavation piercing it. So great was the pressure that timbers 16 inches square, packed closely together, broke up like matchwood and blocked the boring. After 6 months of hard work, the engineers succeeded in replacing the wooden with iron frames, formed of girders 15 3/4 inches deep, 6 1/8 inches wide across the flanges, and 5/8 inch thick in the plates. Stout timbers bolted to each side of the frames greatly increased their strength. In the first portion of the fault, 32 frames were placed contiguously, but in the farther part spaces of 16 to 48 inches, filled in with concrete, separated then according to the plasticity of the schist. The difficulty of erecting these frames was, as may be imagined, very great, at one time apparently insurmountable, if the engineer's vocabulary admits such a word. The delay, in addition to the extra work, entailed a great increase of speed in the boring beyond, where the rock is more amenable, to make up for lost time. The frames allow an internal passage, 8 feet 2 inches by 9 feet 2 inches. The material all round them had to be cleared away for a generous distance to admit an unusually thick lining of masonry. The removal of the schist has proved a very tedious business, since care must be taken not to leave the frames unsupported for more than a few feet at any one place. Excavation commenced by cutting a hole through one of the side posts sufficiently large to pass workmen and materials. The men chiseled a short shaft downwards, and then drove a heading under the base of the frame to the center line, and the half of the invert, or arch, with the concave side upwards, or gentler curvature than the tunnel roof, was built in. Meanwhile, other hands tunneled below the farther side of the frame, and when they too reached the center line and put in their half of the masonry, a section of the tunnel bottom was finished. The work proceeded after this manner in rings a few feet apart. The sides and upper arch have next to be dealt with. It has been proposed to build these in when the interval between the outside of the frames and the inner side of the tunnel lining has been cleared and filled with temporary masonry, which will serve as a support for the timbering in the space actually occupied by the lining. The completion of this short length will probably require a total of nearly 2 years' work. It was found impossible to drive the smaller tunnel forward through the fault, so the engineers abandoned No. 2 heading for a time, and when No. 1 heading was lined, cut a cross passage and burrowed backwards. At the working face, 3 Brandt hydraulic drills, mounted on a beam wedged across the heading, are eating holes into the rock for the reception of the blasting charges. A short description of these drills is pertinent, as they have played so important a part in the excavation. On the Mont Cenis and St. Gotthard tunnels, the holes were bored by percussion air drills, making 200 strokes a minute. During the driving of the Arlberg tunnel, 1880 to 1884, a trial was given to Brandt's invention, which revolves a hollow cutter, 2 3/4 to 3½ inches in diameter, held against the face of the rock by a hydraulic ram exerting a pressure of about 10 tons. A couple of small cylinders drive the mandrel holding the cutter through worm gearing, and the exhaust water issuing from them is shot up the center of the drill, serving the double purpose of cooling the metal and removing the detritus. The severity of the work soon wears down the 3 fangs at the cutting edge, which must be reformed in the smithy, where 300 to 500 cutters are treated daily, according to the nature of the stratum encountered, and in addition 1,000 to 3,000 hand chisels. The drills are tended by 14 or 15 of the smartest miners, capable of sustained work under most trying conditions, and supervised by a foreman and engineer. The slowly revolving cutters having made 11 holes 3 feet 3 inches to 4 feet 7 inches deep in the face, the drill beam is twisted round on its truck and run into a place of safety. Then the dynamite truck advances with its deadly load. Special workmen place 6 pounds of explosive into each hole, fix the detonators and fuses, and ram in fine borings behind as tamping. When all is ready, the fuses are lit, and every one quickly withdraws into shelter. From their refuge the men count the reports, which are accompanied by a violent rush of air and dense fumes. The last are precipitated by jets of water from the high-pressure hydraulic main, let loose after each explosion. 10 minutes having elapsed since the last discharge, the men return to the heading to pile the debris into trucks, which are hauled out by small ponies to the air locomotives, which pass them on to the steamers. Each lift, or advance, of the drills removes 264 cubic feet of rock. In hard rock, only 3 or 4 lifts are made a day, but in soft the number rises to 8 or 10. The general method of clearing out the workings to full section is similar to that already described in connection with the Severn tunnel. The blasted passage serves as the lower heading from which shafts are chiseled upwards to the elevation of the tunnel crown to act as starting points for the upper galleries. As soon as the arch has been quarried out, the floor separating the 2 headings is cut away and the lower portion enlarged. Wherever necessary, an elaborate system of timbering ensures the safety of the workmen and prevents the caving in of the sides. The masons follow hard behind the excavators and put in the lining of stone. When the tunnel is completed, special attention will be paid to its ventilation. At Brieg and Iselle, the entrances are to be provided with stout curtains to turn the air from one tunnel to the other through a cross passage at the extremities. Air forced in from Brieg will travel to Iselle through one tunnel and return through the other. The same effects will result from suction. The curtains are of a material which will not offer sufficient resistance to damage a train, if by accident they are not removed in time for its transit. Marseille is a long way from the Simplon, yet the Marseillaise will feel the effects of the tunnel. On the opening of the Mont-Cenis route, the eastern mail services were transferred from Marseille to Brindisi, and passengers also largely used the same means of shortening the journey to India. Another serious blow at the prosperity of the great southern French port was struck by the St. Gotthard tunnel, which places Bâle 135 miles nearer an important harbor, Genoa, than it is to Marseille. Consequently, all the merchandise sent from England, Belgium, Holland, and German Switzerland now goes to Genoa by rail for shipment to the Mediterranean seaboard. The completion of the Simplon project will still further increase the commercial importance of Genoa at the expense of Marseille, and the position has become so serious that plans have been proposed for connecting the latter town with the Rhône at Bras-Mort by a canal 34 miles long, skirting the Gulf of Lyons for part of its course. The work is estimated to cost 8 million francs. A canal 20 feet deep would enable vessels of 1,000 tons displacement to reach points 300 miles up the river, and if the cargoes were transshipped to 300-ton barges, they could pass over the existing system of internal waterways to Nancy, Paris, Havre, and Lille. The cost of water transport being but one half of that by rail, especially in the case of heavy merchandise such as coal and other minerals, Marseille may win back to herself much of the traffic that has been diverted by the far-away tunnels in the Alps. End of chapter 12.